Thank the Peanut Commission again for the funding we get for investing the peanut growers' dollars into hopefully what we're doing. Second thing is, on these slides, if you see misspelled words, you don't have to tell me, okay? Programmer Adrian Morrell sitting right, he's taking notes on any mistakes he sees, so don't worry about it, he's taking account for it. And the third thing is, if you don't know Mr. Glenlee Chase, Mr. Mike McClendon sitting on the front row, they have been here sitting on the front row since I started. And I think it's those kind of relationships with growers like Mike and Mr. Glenlee that really make this job the best job in the world. And I think that when I look back at the University of Georgia Extension, research, the Peanut Commission, and the growers, what makes this the best job in the world for me is these relationships that span now 26 years for me. So anyway, I'm glad you're here. Appreciate you sitting on the front row. You may be sitting on the front row for Eric and not me, but don't tell me, okay? Just make me believe it. All right, let's get started. My wife, she walked into the kitchen and she said, no, she didn't say anything. She just looked and she paused and then she kept going. And I said, honey, don't you want to know why I was taking a picture of the kitchen sink? She said, no, I really don't. I don't want to know. She said, and then she kept going. She never did hear. But anyway, what I've tried to do today at the encouragement of Dr. Montfort, our team leader, and also the commission, to give you something that you won't, this is not anything like what we'll be talking at grower meetings. Some of the slides may be the same, but it won't be anything like it. And what I'm basing this on is what we get, Eric, every year, and that says, well, why didn't it turn out the way I knew it should? What happened that it didn't go right? Or I did everything I could, and this term I use the euphemism, I threw the kitchen sink at it. Okay? And so the question here is what sometimes when you think you've done everything you should have done, what can go wrong with it? Okay? The threats in my wheelhouse. And you're going to meet Dr. Clement Oliveira, and I'd be remiss if Dr. Albert Culbreth, everything we do, and formerly with us, Tim Brenneman. Fortunately, he's not formally on this planet, but now he is retired. But a lot of this stuff comes from what we do together. And again, the Georgia Peanut Commission and the National Peanut Board are huge on funding this. But in my wheelhouse, going into 2026, if you're going to grow peanuts successfully, you have to take these into account. You have to take tomato spotted wilt virus. And that's something that Mark Abney, sitting up front, and I work on together. It's an entomology, it's an agronomy, it's a weed science, it's an integrated problem. Seedling diseases, nematodes and fungal diseases, whether it's leaf spot or white mold or peanut rust or cylindriclade and black ride, all of those things you have to take into consideration. You know that. You didn't come here to hear it. But in my wheelhouse, that's what we have to do. But this is what we get every year, spoken or unspoken. Questions like this: I did everything I knew to do, and I still ended up with too much disease. The one that gets me really nervous is when, Bob, I did everything you told me. I did what you told me to do. I followed, I listened. Adrian, I came to the meetings, I watched the posts. I watched the everything you did. We read the production guides, we did it, and we still had problems. Number 3, I spent too much money. You know, disease management is not cheap, and I spent too much money. I'm expecting more than what I got. And some of the most patient growers will say this: I'm not mad, Bob. I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at anybody. I just want to try and understand what happened. What could I have done better? And that's what this talk is about. This talk is about what can we do better? What maybe we didn't do? We tried to do everything right, but maybe something happened. Now, there's some things which are fairly easy. Fairly easy for us, not for you necessarily. Because if you follow PeanutRx, which you know is our disease risk index, and it's been updated for 2026, and Barry Tillman's in the audience, and we've adjusted some of the Florida values. We put some new Florida varieties. Nino is here. Dr. Branch may be here. We put new varieties on it. We updated. But that's basically what we've got, right? Corley, same thing. We've adjusted what we had on there from last year. You were there helping us do that, right? So you know that by following PeanutRx, you have an idea of what happens and don't happens. Right? In this picture, no one's going to ask me at the end of the year why the highly resistant variety on the right and the 06G on the left, why there's a difference in spotted wilt. You know that. This is not a question you're going to have. You accept that spotted wilt is a problem. You accept that it's different from year to year. Pressure could be different from year to year. And you understand that if you plant a variety with more points, it's going to have a greater chance of having a problem with spotted wilt than one that's more resistant. That's why we have PeanutRx. That's why we change varieties up. Also, this is a picture from Scott Mumford. This is about 2015, Scott. And no one questions this either.
We recognize in this photograph, or you should, there was poor rotation. I say poor rotation, it simply wasn't enough years between peanut. If you don't have enough years between the peanut crop, you know you're going to have problems. The second thing is the grower invested in a 1994 fungicide program, tebuconazole and Bravo. Nothing wrong with that. It's not a wrong answer, it's a cheap answer, inexpensive, less expensive answer. But you know that when you got different varieties on short rotation, you got tebuconazole Bravo out there, you're bound to see differences. You're bound to see more disease in some varieties than expected to, Danny. That's no surprise to you, is it? None at all. I'm blind, Danny, but I can see you sitting back there, all right? That's how much I know you, all right? So again, this isn't what the talk's about. Because no one's going to call me and say, well, what happened? Because we know what happened. What happened? Short rotation, less resistant varieties, a less expensive fungicide program that just didn't have the same power. This isn't what the talk's about. And again, this is Tim Brenneman's data. And if you can look on the right-hand side versus the left-hand side is Georgia 12Y, right-hand side is 06G. No one's going to question why we have more white mold in 06G, right? We know this. These are things that growers in the room, you understand you're going to see more disease sometimes. And one of my favorite pictures. And again, no one's going to question this. They might scratch their head and say, wow, I didn't know it was that dramatic. But this was in plains. These are 06G, same lot, same variety, same planting date. The only difference, Mark, is, and I've heard you talk about thiamet 1,000 million times, right? But the difference there is whether they use thiamet or not underneath the furrow. And that's why growers in 2026 may be moving towards thiamet. Why? Because they believe this. This is not what this talk is about, because I don't have to explain to you what happened. You understand, you believe. You've seen it, you understand. If this happens in your field, you say, well, I won't do that again next year, right? Or I'm gonna make a change. Here we are, this is Attapulgus. On the, it's backwards here. All right, so on the left-hand side is 06G with no nematicide. The right-hand side is Tiffin VHG, right? And again, anybody who looks at it's not going to say, well, I don't know, why did that happen? Why do I have a problem in that field? It's a nematode infested. That field's root knot nematode infested. No one's going to say to me, Glenn, they're not going to say to me, well, why did the 06G do so bad? You know why it is. But what may come up is this question. But Bob, I planted 06G, but I put nematicide out. I put Aglogic out. I put Vellum out. I put Vidate out. I put Outreach out. The new one from Valent, right? And I still had a nematode problem. Okay? That's a question I'll get. Well, what's the answer to that? The answer to that is that if you needed to set this up, this is yield at the end of the season on the far left, that is in a field which was ate up with root knot nematode. The only one that approached 5,000 pounds was the one on the far left, that maroon bar, and that's what? Tiffin VHG. Everything else in there is a good solid attempt at 06G. 06G with nothing is blue. The red is, I know you can't read it, the red is the Vellum, the green is Vidate, the purple is Outreach, and then the bright purple is Aglogic. Was that a failure? I did everything I could, Bob. I did what you told me to do. I went out there and I used a nematicide. Instead of planting a resistant variety, I used 06G. I believe in it. Again, the point here, the take home is, it's not that the nematicides didn't do what they do. If you put this into an environment where you have such an overwhelming, powerful population of root knot nematodes, short of using Telone, which no one in here probably can afford these days, you may not get what you expect to get, all right? So the take-home message here is sometimes when we do the best we can with what we've got, or we need to really think about what is the nematode population. Our threshold for root knot nematode and peanut is 10 per 100 cc of soil. That's not many, right? This field may have been up around 300. And it's not that we're not encouraging Vellum and Vidate and Outreach and Aglogic. It's recognizing they may not be enough. There's another one out there too. All right? Well, Bob, I put out the Tiffin VHG, or I put out the Aglogic like you told me. I did, and I still had this problem. Okay? What's this situation? I don't know if Rome Etheridge is in the room or not, but Rome Etheridge is the one. He's the king of finding this in Southwest Georgia. This is lesion nematode. Okay? Corley, I don't think our root knot nematode resistant varieties are resistant to this nematode. Okay, so sometimes there's things we don't expect, we don't understand. You put out resistance, you put out a nematicide, but then it's a pest you're not familiar with that can come back and bite you. Will an in-furrow application of anything anything help you with a pegging problem? No. With an in-furrow application, you're protecting the roots. You're trying to get a better growing, more robust plant. But to protect against something like lesion nematode, which is primarily a problem of the pegs and the pods, and primarily the pegs, that is going to take applications of something, whether it's Proline or Propulse or Vitate, something later in the season to help you with that. Okay? So sometimes it's we think we did everything we could. We tried. We spent the money. But if you spend the money on something which is not going to be effective, it's up against the 8 ball from the time you put it out, simply because your population is too high or because your pest is different than you thought it was, there's a problem. Okay? All right? I can tell you, I don't believe there's any magic. Is that Danny Colvin in the back? I don't know if it is. If he says one word, I'll know it's Danny Colvin. It is Danny Colvin. Glad you're here today. Mike McLennan will sit on the front row and you'll sit on the back row, right? Good to have you here. Oh, so this problem, okay, with leaf spot, complete defoliation. We may not be that bad, but there's some growers who rightfully expect the McMillans in Berrien County. You know, a lot of times they'll come up with almost no leaf spot in the field. Why? Because of the management that goes on out there. But we have good growers who are showing up with maybe not this much, but why? Why do we have it? What do a lot of growers, not you, but a lot of other growers want to say? If I have a problem with leaf spot in the field, what's the reason for that? The fungicide didn't work, right? The McMillans made tebuconazole and chlorothalonil work for many, many years. How? By taking into consideration the basics. Good crop rotation, 2 years between a peanut crop. And the basics here, before we start talking about whether a fungicide worked or not, we got to talk about the basics, starting this program on time. Eric will talk, or used to talk about weeds have to be less than 2 inches tall, right? If you're above 2 inches tall, then all bets are off. That's the same thing here. Stay on schedule. If you get behind in schedule, rain keeps you out of the field, or something like that, you can't get back in the field and you're off schedule, then you don't necessarily go back and just pick up where you left off. You may have to call an audible. You may have to use products you didn't expect to use. Applying a fungicide to wet foliage. A great grower in Miller County. Great grower in Miller County. Always started 14 days religiously and always started at the crack of dawn on one side of the field, and the leaves were always wet when he started spraying that. And he couldn't understand, and the consultant couldn't understand why they had a leaf spot problem. It's because you don't get the full benefit out of any fungicide if you're always spraying the foliage when it's wet. Spray volume, calibration, speed through the field. A grower in Cook County did everything right. Everything right, and at the last minute we finally figured out when you go too fast through the field, your coverage is affected. All right, so it matters. Drying time, how long does it dry? Most fungicides for leaf spot, if you're not getting, we'd like them to get 8 hours of drying time. Now I know there's some that need about 2 hours, some that need about 4 hours. But the target should be, if you're not getting a sufficient amount of drying time, you know you're not going to get efficacy. Check Peanut RX and then your fungicide selection. Because there is no doubt that some of our fungicides are more effective than others. We got better fungicides out there. Dr. Culberth's done their studies to show it. I won't show you that data today. But we can clearly show that Provosol and Provo Silver and Miravis at the higher rate, Albert, your data is showing that they stand out when you put them under pressure. What's the key words there? When you put them under pressure, the goal should be is to not put them under pressure in the first place. Okay? But you got a lot of good fungicides on there. For your information, if you don't know it, we're going to have a lot of new fungicides, generic fungicides coming out. Provo Silver, I call it Lazarus. It rose from the dead, hurricane-proof. You know, I don't know if that's true or not, but certainly it has taken on a new life of its own, being good for late season. For leaf spot control, Albert showed that. Everybody and their brother is going to have their own formulation. On the right-hand side, it's an example of a generic Provo Silver. To our knowledge, they seem to perform similar. Okay, just recognize, just be careful. I encourage you to try it, but just be careful. Left-hand side is prothioconazole plus azoxystrobin. Okay? Again, we haven't tried this one as much, Albert, but when might you decide you want to use a prothioconazole plus azoxystrobin on the left-hand side versus a prothioconazole plus tebuconazole? When might you do that? If Rhizoch's your problem, 12Ys maybe. If you got a Rhizoch problem, that might be a time to choose that. Okay? Let's talk about white mold. White mold's even more finicky than leaf spot is. Leaf spot is if you get behind, if you're late starting, if the leaves are wet, if you're not getting drying time, if you go too fast. Those are things. It's not the fun. I did everything I could, Bob. I did everything I could. That typically means that you used a good fungicide program and you tried your best to stay on schedule. But things can go wrong. With white mold, it's even more complicated. Why? It's more complicated because to get excellent white mold control, you need good products and you have to get that material down to the crown of the plant. Consider peanut X, again, 12Y. Who knows how long that variety will be around, but I love it. Why? Because it stands out in my playbook because of its resistance to white mold. Not complete resistance, but better than everything else. Most programs are going to begin at 60 days after planting for white mold. But if it's a hot, dry spring, or if it's a warm spring, or God forbid, you can't get 2 years between peanut crops, you're struggling to get 1 year between peanut crops, couple that with the environmental conditions, it may be important to start earlier than that. All right? Well, I did everything I could, Bob. I started 60 days. In some situations, you may need to call an audible. Any grower in this room who knows what they're going to do for 2026 and they're not willing to come off that game plan, when conditions change, that could be a mistake. And sometimes we want to spray as early as 45 days. Choice of product matters. Spray volume matters. Timing of irrigation. Now listen to me on this one. Irrigation or rainfall is an important strategy in order to get more benefit out of a white mold fungicide. Why? Because we spray to the foliage, but we want to get it down to the crown of the plant. Now, if you get no rainfall, you get no irrigation, you still get benefit from that fungicide. How? By your spray volume and by morning dew moving it down, you still get benefit. But if you want to get maximum benefit from a fungicide for white mold, you need to have irrigation preferably within 8 hours. Tim Brenneman's data shows, though, that if your irrigation or rainfall does not come until 48 hours after you made the application, you're still getting the benefit of the fungicide you would have gotten, but you're not getting any additional benefit from the rainfall or irrigation. Okay? On the fungicides out there. We've never had a better arsenal. When I stood before you, gentlemen, in 2000, we had Abound, we had Folicure, we had Moncut. All right? We have good ones now, better than what we had, or as good. All right? But the goal is make sure you use these appropriately. Make sure you look at the rates. Any one of these fungicides has different rates that can be used. 2023, where I saw the biggest problems in white mold control, was not in the decision on what to use, it was the decision on what rate to use. I work with corn, cotton, soybeans, and peanuts. Peanuts stands out in my world in that they will respond. They respond almost always in a pressure situation to increased use of fungicides. They respond in a profitable way. And so one of the concerns I have sometimes is if we try to cut the cost of a fungicide program by reducing our rates from 3 to 2 ounces, from 9.5 ounces to 7.3 ounces, from 32 ounces to 24 ounces, and you can do the math on what those products are, sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot. We have to be careful. Leaf wetness makes all the difference. You spray a leaf spot fungicide and it's wet like that, you are not. It's impossible to get the full benefit of it. But what do you get? This does not mean you can't spray when there's dew. You can. In fact, when there's dew on the leaves, Albert, I think you're going to probably get better white mold control when it drips off. You just have to be careful about what's going to happen with leaf spot control. Rain and irrigation are critically important. Well, we know this. We could have skipped this part of the talk, Bob. We know this. Yeah, but when we're talking about why we don't get everything we want out of a fungicide program, sometimes it has to do with the rain came too quick, the irrigation came too quick, or didn't come quickly enough at all. As we're looking to optimize, attention to detail on these has a huge importance. Okay? Weather does as well. Okay? We had a very warm, dry harvest season this year. This predisposes us in the 2026 crop. I'm more concerned, I'm more aware of the potential for problems with aspergillus. Why? Because it infects the seed better under hot, dry conditions at harvest. We have that. That's what we had from 2019 to 2020, going into 2020. But the difference between 2020 and 26 is what? The conditions at harvest were very similar. And I know Sergio's here. Sergio, the conditions were very, very similar from 2019 to 2025. Hot and dry sets us up. But what's the big difference? Going into 2026, we have a much more robust seed treatment regime. 2020 is when we learned the problem with azoxystrobin. Okay? Why did we have a problem? We did everything we could, but we ran into a problem we didn't expect with resistance. Hopefully we won't have that this year. White mold and water. All right? If you look at the left-hand side, that's what our generic white mold, that's what our garden variety white mold looks like. White mold will take the top of the plant out along the crown, take the bottom of the plant. On the right-hand side, that is what we call underground white mold. Sometimes the problem comes, sometimes you're surprised. I did everything right, Bob. The crop looked very, very good until the very end, and when I dug the crop, my God, white mold had eaten the bottom of the canopy off, or the pods off. I never saw it. This happened in Jeff Davis County about 5 years ago. We never saw the white mold. We thought we had a super program. How can this happen? Again, this happens especially under dry conditions where you don't have moisture moving the fungicide down. Sometimes it happens. It's not that the fungicide didn't work, it's just that the fungicide didn't get to be where it needed to be. The top of the plant looked great. The white mold quietly ate off almost all the pods. Okay? Realistic expectations. I'm going to finish up with this, all right? Realistic expectations. When we go in and we say, well, what happened? We have to be realistic about what these fungicides can do, what these varieties can and can't do. You know, nothing's perfect in this world. Looking at this. Early season white mold. I must say, this is white mold, small hits of white mold. Is that a problem? For some growers, man, I've got white mold. I get called all the time after this. One grower in particular in Tift County who I love dearly, he called me, I said, man, I got white mold in this field. I sprayed, you told me what to spray, I sprayed it, Bob, and here's what I got. Are those a problem? Are those hits a problem? At that point in time, they're not. They're not because they are small and contained less than the size of a dinner plate. There's nothing we can spray that's going to stop those initial hits, right? There's nothing we can spray. But what we can do is keep it from spreading. That's what early season, that's what early hits of white mold look like. It comes up along the stem. When white mold's a problem is when we can't stop it from those hits, that plant's affected to moving forward. Okay? All right, is that a problem? On the left-hand side, that leaf spot, is that a problem? Having that amount of leaf spot is a problem. Is that a problem, Danny? Okay, nobody wants to see leaf spot in their field. Timing's everything. If I see that much leaf spot on the left-hand side and we've got 60 days to go, if we got 50, 40 days to go until digging, it's a problem. But if we see that amount of leaf spot at the end of the season, no. You don't have to be perfect. Again, Albert, your data shows that with Georgia 6G, you can have upwards of 70% defoliation at the end of the season. And now don't get me wrong, we don't want that, right? But yield loss doesn't start until you get above that. But if we got this picture, we got 60 days to go, 40 days to go until harvest, then it's going to get a lot worse. And at that point in time, we need to make some changes. What about this? Bob, my fungicide program didn't work. I sprayed like you told me to, and I still got problems. Well, let's look at this. On the left-hand side, it's late leaf spot, which is also there, is what? Rust. If rust comes into the equation, we may need to change our game plan. We may need to spray every 7 days, right? The fungicide program changes with the situation on the right-hand side. Man, I'm covered up with leaf spot, Bob. Was it leaf spot? Really? That's burn. Something burned your peanuts. You don't have a problem at all. Don't worry about it. Something burned your peanuts. Sometimes what I'm called to look at, the county agents are called to look at, is not a disease at all. It's something else. Nobody likes to see this in their field, right? Especially my friend in Brookfield. And I'm met up with white mold, right? I'm met up with white mold. Is that one hit right there really that big a deal? It depends. If you can't control it, there's more hits, yes, but a single hit about the size of a dinner plate is not a big deal, okay? What we got to do is make sure we get the fungicide down to the crown of the plant. Okay? Because this is what we want to do, want to avoid rather. This we need to control. This we need to stop. We can't stop those individual hits. We can't stop individual plants. What a fungicide program that's worth anything will do is keep it from turning into that. If you go to a field and you find a little bit of white mold, that tells you what? You need to be preventative. You need to go after it. It doesn't say what you're doing is not working. Okay? What about this? Man, I sprayed everything, Bob. It didn't slow it down. Didn't slow it down. What is that? I thought it was white mold. No, it's not white mold. Okay? Because we've got other diseases out there that can confuse you, that can look like white mold. So on the right hand side, what's that? Cylindricalatum black rot. I mark my word, if we continue to grow, or if we grow more soybeans and less cotton in rotation with peanuts, mark my word, that's coming back. It will. And we cannot confuse it, or if we do confuse it with white mold, our fungicide programs are just not going to work. If you're not getting the control out of a white mold program you think you should, ask yourself about how you're applying it. Ask yourself about the rates. Ask yourself on the left-hand side, is it really white mold, or is it really diplodia collar rot masking itself with tomato spotted wilt virus, which just looks like white mold? Okay? Sometimes we're not seeing what we think we should see. Get calls on this all the time. What is this? Man, my white mold program is not working. Every single plant in my conservation tillage field is ed up with white mold. It's not working. I'm calling the dealer. This isn't white mold. It looks like it. It acts like it visually, but does not cause disease. This is false white mold. Again, sometimes what we're looking about, what we're worried about, is not really a problem. Okay? Bullock County 2 years ago. This is from 2025. This is, I think there's 10 or 12 different fungicide programs on there. That's the amount of leaf spot out there. One means I couldn't find any leaf spot at all. Every single one of those fungicide programs in that field performed well. That doesn't mean there's not differences, but what it means is if you put our fungicide programs out, the recommended fungicide programs out, and you don't have hiccups, and you're not out, and you're not putting too much pressure, this is 06G, we expect good things. It doesn't have to be perfect, but our fungicide programs do work. These same studies, we find this is the amount of white mold in the field on the left-hand axis, or on the bottom, the x-axis, and the right-hand axis is yield. We know there is a direct linear relationship to the amount of white mold in the field versus the yield. We know that. You know that. This trial from 2025 in Bullock County, what this says is that we have, these are a number of different fungicide programs, the latest, Umbra, Excalia, Convoy, Corteva with Fontellus, Vantana, a lot of different fungicide programs, they worked in this field. What's the only one that didn't work very well? And that's the one on the far right-hand side. That's 1994. Okay? So we can have confidence in our fungicide program. Some, if you look at the far left, that's where we're always going to be towards the top. But just recognize, if we stay on time, we're going to be in good shape. Last slide is this one. 2 slides. The other side to a good, profitable fungicide program is make sure that your fungicide program reflects your risk. Tim, like I said, you all made use of fungicides for a lot longer with tebuconazole bravo than others did, okay? In a situation like this, which had 10 years out of peanuts, very long rotation. Well, I don't have that. Well, just listen to me. In this situation, the difference between our best fungicides and our right hand, the bright bar with the tebuconazole, is not very different, okay? Bob is saying fungicide programs are important. Putting them out right is important. But what I'm also saying is, look at what your risk is. Use Peanut RX. If you have strong variety, strong rotation, a lot of favorable things, you don't have to throw the kitchen sink at it to get the control you need. Sometimes less is better. But that only comes if you can make an educated guess on it. I'm not an educated, if you make an educated decision, okay? Because when you look at that trial, the difference between the best and the least is only a couple 100 pounds of peanuts, okay? I'm gonna close there. That's also what you find in peanut fields, right? That was 2024. I'm gonna close. What I want to leave you with is this. It's understandable, frustration, when you feel like you've done everything you should have done. You've done everything extension recommended to you. You've done everything you could have done, and the results are not what you expected. All right? The first thing is make sure your expectations are realistic. Was your expectation for what you planted and how you planted it and what fungicide program and nematicide program you used, was it realistic for the pressure you were under? The second thing is be realistic. If a little bit of disease late in the season, is that really a failure of a program, or does it mean you simply put the right program out and the right amount of input? And the last thing is this, when we are making decisions on fungicides going into 2026, they're critically important, they're a good investment. But the fungicides that we apply, the nematicides we apply, are only as good as the attention to how we put them out. And that has to do with the amount of leaf wetness. It has to do with irrigation timing, rainfall timing. It has to do with crop rotation. It has to do with variety. So when we're frustrated by we threw everything we could at it, sometimes the devil is in the details. How you did it, when you did it, and what you did. Okay? Questions for me? That's what I've got for today. I appreciate the commission having us out here.